Is Labour trying to cover up the truth about the Migrant Crime League table in a bid to not stoke racial tensions? We have a right to know the nationality, ethnicity, visa status, asylum status and the type of crime committed by people who have either been welcomed into Britain or just broken in. Here on Patrick Christie's Tonight, we demanded this data. Our Freedom of Information request was denied because it would have taken up too much manpower and been too costly. So we decided, well, we'll offer to pay for the Home Office and the Ministry of Justice to just do that work. They refused. Well, I felt at the time that they were trying to hide something, and I still think they are. Yesterday, Labour revealed there'd be some kind of Migrant Crime League table. Great news, everyone thought, fantastic, bit of a fanfare. But only one relating to asylum seekers who had committed crimes whilst awaiting deportation. Now, I suspect that will show mostly Albanians and other Eastern Europeans, because we don't seem to be deporting that many people from the Middle East or Africa, do we? So the nationalities most likely to be arrested for sex offences in Britain include Sudanese, Afghans, Eritreans, Iranians and Iraqis. Now, Somalis also rank very highly in that and indeed other forms of crime. And I don't think Labour's data is going to show you any of that. And I wonder whether they are attempting yet again to only release information that will not stoke racial tensions. So, earlier today, I spoke to Shadow Justice Minister Robert Jenrick about this very issue, and here's how it went. Pleased to say that Shadow Justice Minister Robert Jenrick joins me in the studio now. Thank you very much. Is this a partial victory? It's only foreign criminals awaiting deportation that we're going to get the data on, as we understand it.
Well, I've been campaigning for over a year now for full transparency, for the publication of data on all those who commit crime in our country by their nationality, their visa status and their asylum status, because I think it's incredibly important the public know the truth about low-skilled mass migration and the impact that it's having on our country and communities, and also that we actually do something about it and tailor our immigration system accordingly to protect the British public. It's very welcome that something is happening, but this looks like a massively watered-down version of what I've been campaigning for and what I tried to change the law to be just over a year ago. This looks like it will not shine the light that we really need on everyone who's in our country who isn't a British national and who's committing crime. And the statistics are very clear on that. You know, the indicative data that we've seen shows that an Afghan or an Eritrean, for example, are 20 times more likely to commit a sexual crime than a British national. And overall, foreigners are 71% more likely to commit a sex crime than a British national. That is the kind of data that we need finally to be in the public domain.
Us blokes hate talking about a little thinning up top, and many of us settle with that balding look, but that wasn't for me. And that's why I went to Elite Hair, the world's leading hair loss clinic, and now I've had over 4,000 new hairs added to this barnet, and very soon I'm going to be rocking some brand new flowing locks. And you can too. So how does it work? Step 1, I sent the team a set of photos of my head. Step 2, I then spoke to one of the Elite Hair staff who looked through my photo submissions and worked out a treatment plan for me. Step 3, Elite Hair then organised accommodation and the treatment. I was at their state-of-the-art treatment centre in Istanbul, and their incredibly kind staff took me through the process, and before I knew it, I was in surgery. Elite Hair and their leading medical experts have specialised in pain-free treatments using the Sleep Deep method, and they really mean that. I felt incredibly relaxed the whole time, and I haven't felt any pain since. Check out Elite Hair using the link in the description. When you do, Elite Hair will provide you with a free personalised hair analysis. Then you'll join over 100,000 happy patients. Hit that link and start your hair growth journey like I did today.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if it is as we suspect, as has been reported, that it is those just scheduled for deportation, the vast majority of those are Albanians, Eastern Europeans. It will not show, as we understand it then, people from various Middle Eastern countries, which frankly a lot of people are most concerned about, given the occupants in a lot of those migrant hotels, maybe where they live.
Well, the indicative data that we have seen, mainly that's been dragged out of government through freedom of information requests by campaigners, shows that there are massive disparities in the likelihood of committing crime, particularly sex crimes, from certain nationalities. And as you say, not in every case, but in many cases, they tend to be countries in Africa or the Middle East where some people just don't share our values. And so if this data is not going to shine a light on that, then it's going to be woefully inadequate. And the question everyone will be asking is, What's being hidden here? Why does the Ministry of Justice, why does the Home Office, why does the government not want to be completely transparent? Are they trying to hide something, or don't think that the public are capable of understanding what they're going to see?
But you must feel as though you've really had to wrestle this out of them, really. I mean, we did a piece here on GB News where we offered to even pay for the manpower that it would take for them to reveal all of this information, and they decided not to. Is there a concern, do you think, that what it might reveal would just be too shocking for the public to handle?
Well, we have had to absolutely drag this out of government. I tabled an amendment just over a year ago to the then Criminal Justice Bill that was supported by GB News and by some of your presenters like Jacob Rees-Mogg and Miriam Kate and many others, some of whom are now in Reform, some are Conservative members of Parliament. And it's taken all this time to get to this point, which doesn't even sound like this is the end of our campaign. It's just the end of the beginning. I think there was a conspiracy of silence where people within the system didn't want to present the full, unalloyed truth to the public, perhaps because people would be absolutely appalled by what they saw, which was that mass migration, particularly of low-skilled, low-wage people, particularly from some parts of the world with attitudes towards women and girls that are antithetical to our own, alien to our own cultures, were really fueling crime, particularly sex crimes. We've seen that through the data that has got into the public domain. We've seen it anecdotally. Now it is so important that we get that data out and that we actually do something about it. And what I want to see is not just outrage, but we channel that into action, and that we change our immigration system so that we are much more careful about who comes into this country. And if there are some nationalities where the statistics demonstrate beyond any doubt that those individuals are far, far more likely to be committing crimes, hurting our people, then clearly we should be much more judicious about giving them visas, giving them rights to come into this country.
One point of criticism that James O'Brien from LBC was very quick to jump on earlier this morning was that this is just a way of scapegoating foreigners.
Not at all. I mean, it may actually be that some nationalities are shown to be far less likely to commit crime than we, British citizens, British nationals. And that's what the data will demonstrate. But the indicative data that we have seen is clear that overall, foreigners are 71% more likely to commit sex crimes than British nationals. And that is an important fact that needs to be out there. I just want to protect the British people. And if there are some people coming into this country from nations who the data show are far, far more likely to commit very, very serious crimes like rape or sexual assault of women and girls, then we should have a different immigration system with respect to those countries, which is much more careful in the background checks, much less likely to offer visas. And I'm not alone in making this argument. If you look at the National Crime Agency, they, for example, have said that there is a very clear link between Albanians in this country and serious organised crime, that a very high percentage of our drug production in this country is being managed in one form or another by Albanians. So the evidence is there already. What hasn't happened in the past is either full transparency or the system adapting so that we make asylum and visa decisions accordingly.
Why didn't the Tory party do this? When you were in power, when you had the chance, were you let down by some of your colleagues, do you think? Because this could have been out there in the last 14 years, couldn't it?
Well, it should have happened earlier, frankly. I led a campaign just over a year ago. Many colleagues supported me, but we weren't able to persuade the then Conservative government to do this. I'm pleased that the new government is acting upon this, but disappointed that they're doing so both in such a mealy-mouthed, watered-down way and slowly as well, because they're saying this is going to happen sometime over the course of this year. Surely this can happen sooner than that, because this is a really important topic. It's obviously one that millions of people in our country care about. And I want to see them changing the way they're making asylum and immigration decisions right now so that we're not importing crime into our country.
Is it a bit rich for people like Chris Philp now, the Shadow Home Secretary, to come out and hail this as a victory, says that the Labour government's crumbled under pressure? Well, wasn't that your pressure, and wasn't he standing in the way of you trying to do it in Italy?
Well, I'm not here to cast fire. I'm just pleased that we've got to this point. And there were many, many Conservative MPs who did back me at the time and who I've thanked on Twitter Twitter for their support. What I want to do now is build a very different immigration system so that we are much more careful. It is a real privilege to come into our country, isn't it? It's not a right. No one's got a right, whether as a tourist, for work, or indeed for asylum. We should be making those decisions with great care, and first and foremost, in fact, every single time, we should be thinking, how do we protect people in this country? And I don't want to be putting British citizens in any danger. And so we should be making asylum and immigration decisions where we always put the British people's safety first.
Thank you very much for your time, as ever. Take care. That's Robert Jenrick there, the Shadow Justice Minister. Thank you. Well, there we go. What do we make of that? Let me introduce my panel. Of course, got Alex Armstrong, we've got Esther Crackett, we've got Chris Worrell as well. Alex, I'll start with you. Do you suspect here that Labour are going to release the data on the people who've committed crime awaiting deportation? Well, it doesn't take a genius to work out who most of those are. They go to countries that we can actually deport people to, like Eastern Europe. It's not going to reveal sex crimes by Middle Eastern and African men, I don't think.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. This is going to be the ultimate cop-out to say they've done it. To say, oh no, these are people that aren't staying here, so therefore we don't mind releasing the data. But I think that, what Robert was saying there and what you were saying, Patrick, is absolutely spot on. It's the reality is they are worried about some sort of public outpouring after Southport and other things where they think people are going to start fighting each other all of a sudden over data. The reality is we all know these things are happening. We all know what communities they're happening in. What we need is a bit of transparency. We live in a democracy, not an authoritarian dictatorship. And I will say this, the Tories did have 14 years to release this data. They did do that, so I do hold them accountable for not doing it as well. Yeah, that's the reality. I mean, there will be questions asked if the whole data was released. Should we rebuke visas? Should we not have people from certain countries coming to this country? I would be asking them.
So how would you respond to some of the criticism of this, which is that it's just a cheap way of, I suppose maybe putting a target on certain ethnic minorities' backs? What does it achieve? Oh, it shows you that Albanians are X times more likely to be drug dealers or Poles or whatever. Even if it did actually reveal the rape statistics involving Afghan men or whatever.
Why wouldn't we want to know this?
People say it might lead to stigmatising foreigners.
But why wouldn't we want to know this? If certain nationalities are underrepresented in crimes, we should know it, just as we should know if certain nationalities are overrepresented. And then we can go into the whys and what we can do about it. Labour has two main problems. One, the cabinet are people completely out of their depth, who've never really done anything significant with their own careers, like have a proper job. And two, they think we're stupid. They think that if they pretend that they're just going to release statistics on people that are about to be deported, we're not going to clock that actually Afghans and Eritreans, many of whom we cannot deport, are overrepresented in crimes like sexual offences, for example. They think we're so stupid that we're never going to realise that by saying, oh yes, we've deported 3,000 people so far, as if there's not an estimated 1 million plus illegal immigrants in this country at the moment. They think we're so stupid that we're not going to realise that 14,000 people currently in prisons in England and Wales are foreign criminals who should be deported, many of whom cannot be deported. They think we're stupid.
Well, whilst I do want to know about the people that we are deporting. Fantastic, great. But I actually am more bothered, and I suspect most people watching and listening to this are more bothered, Chris, about the crimes and the nationalities and ethnicities of those people involved who are legal immigrants who we've welcomed in and who we're not going to deport. Anyway, I want to know what kind of crimes they're committing in case there's a pattern there, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, look, what you've got to see from Labour is a commitment to transparency. I think the sort of question around, the conviction rates of people being deported, like you said, it talks about, Albanians and Poles. Well, Poles have a 1.18 per thousand people per capita crime rates, lower than the average. So if we're going to be seeing that in these sort of data sets, we've got to be careful. And that probably does highlight the risk of publishing this data. But I think, like to the point you made, if 2/3 of the world we can't deport them, what are these statistics really going to tell us? I think if we look to the likes of Holland, they categorise things a bit more, fairly, where it's non-Western or Western, it's a bit more broad brush, a bit more objective. And I think when you look at Denmark, it's more interesting to the point is, they look at conviction rates. So we're at about 1.57% as a conviction rate of people getting incarcerated. Denmark's at 1%. They start looking at areas like parallel societies. This comes from a centre-left government, by the way, where they say if an area's got three times that amount, then it becomes a sort of vulnerable area under their parallel societies. So I think, the Labour Party needs to really sort of maybe focus on...
The Labour Party used to make this point back in the early 2000s before apparently speaking common sense was criminalised. They used to actually make this point. People like Trevor Phillips in the Labour Party used to make this point, but now it's criminal. Can I just point out that we actually provide aid, financial aid to Afghanistan, Eritrea, Sudan, all of these places that we don't have deportation agreements with. What sensible government is happy to give money to a foreign nation, but they're not happy to take their criminal citizens back? It's the same problem that the French have. They cannot deport Algerians, Libyans, Moroccans that have committed crimes, and they're stuck in these massive mega prisons in places like Paris and Marseille without the ability to be deported. This is assuming they even get arrested, by the way.
Yeah. Just before I'll give out this final word on this, but Chris, just on that then, do you think that we should be doing things like cutting foreign aid unless people take back their criminals? Until very recently, I think the Foreign Secretary David Lammy had it pinned to the top of his Twitter/X profile, we must never forget the people of Sudan. Well, why not get them to take back their rapists?
Well, I think there's a fair point to make around, if we've got, we're moving to like digital sort of, when you're coming in on a visa, we're pushing that to on the point of entry. If we are going to give foreign aid, we should be looking at how they can digitise their borders, and maybe that might make it easier to do such things. I wouldn't.
They're absolutely not going to do that.
Well,
like Sudan,
the EU's
consistent electricity.
The UK is catching up with America and Canada on this, and I think that's where the rest of the world needs to go to.
Well, to power their
digital ID.
Yeah, fine. It's one of the arguments, though, isn't it? It's one of the arguments. Alex, I'll give you a final word on this. I mean, do you think that it would be potentially too devastating for the Labour Party? And by the way, I think this is this mess that the Tories had themselves in. Yep. We talk about why didn't they do this for 14 years? Because if the stats are anywhere near as bad as people fear that they might be when it comes to things like, or for example, the Pakistani grooming gang cases, or the figures that we do have about the rates of Afghan sex offences and all of that stuff, then they would have to admit that they let this problem in.
Yes.
And that they ideologically called for it, basically.
Yeah, and then they sat by and did nothing. And so it will be damning on both parties, frankly. That's the reality. So I'm sure that many of the Tories don't want this to happen, by the way.
Yeah.
But, the reality is the British public is sensible. And they'll say, well, what are you going to do now we have this knowledge? Are we going to have police targeting communities so they can have specific targeted operations to maybe where there's been ghettoisation due to massive failure of assimilation? Are we going to have more sensible discussions with those local community leaders? For example, say, things are going on in your area, mate. What are you doing about it? We've delegated policing to them. But this is the important bit.
We've had Labour members being suspended as early as 1997 for making these points. We're in 2025. Yeah. We're past the point of let's have the data.
And Labour's releasing the data.
But here's the thing. This is a almost 30-year problem. We've had these conversations for 28 plus years. People in the Labour Party have been suspended for saying this. We've had all of this information for years. Enough talk.
All crime data by all races, all nationalities should be released.
It's simple as that.
Well, look, there we go. We'll have to wait and see exactly what happens. As it currently stands at this time of broadcast, we are only expecting them to release data on people who've committed crimes whilst awaiting deportation. There are obvious problems with that. We've spoken about a lot of that. I just wonder, what are they afraid of?